Hello and welcome to Research Matters podcasts. Today I, Aishwarya Vishwamitra, will give you a summary of your weekly dose of Indian science news published on Research Matters in the last week. The last week saw some exciting stories on health sciences and ecology. Gender disparity is no news in India. It has percolated into all levels of our lives like workforce, academia, and even art. Although efforts are on to empower women, we have as a country miles to go. A recent study highlights the plight of India's missing women in healthcare. The researchers include doctors and economists, analyzed over 2 lakh outpatient visitors to the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, AIIMS, New Delhi, to understand how many of them were women and which department they visited. AIIMS in New Delhi is India's premier public hospital and has visitors coming in from most parts of North India to avail specialized treatments. The researchers of the study looked at the age, gender, state of residence, and the hospital department each patient visited. In each age and state category, they compared the male and female visitors to the sex ratio of that state to estimate what should have been the number of female visits. Any guesses on what they found? A grim picture of statistics highlighting the case of missing women in India's healthcare. The study found that on average, male outpatients visited 1.69 times more than female outpatients, even though the sex ratio of the population is 1.09. That is, roughly the same number of males and females were expected to visit the hospitals, considering everything else to be even. The researchers also found that elderly women and young female children were the most underrepresented, probably because their visits need an accompanying family member, a fact that sometimes becomes inconvenient. Bihar had the highest number of missing female patients, followed by Uttar Pradesh, Haryana, and then New Delhi. The sex ratio in Bihar, according to the 2011 census, was 1.09, but more than twice the number of men than women visited the hospital. Among women who did visit, most sought general departments like the Department of Medicine or Orthopedics, and not specialized departments such as cardiology. This observation, the researchers say, could be because specialized care is more expensive, and households could exclude women from availing them. This study shows how scientific and social fabric of our society is at the heart of any research. Dr. Ambuj Roy, a cardiologist at AIIMS and the author of the study, opines that linkages should be encouraged, especially in India, because they strengthen the quality and breadth of research. While we are on the topic of healthcare, let's talk about another aspect, cancer, a dreaded disease characterized by unstoppable cell division in our body. In a study, researchers from the Institute of Bioinformatics, Bengaluru, Manipal Academy of Higher Education, MAHE, Manipal, Med Genome Labs Limited, Bengaluru, and Postgraduate Institute of Medical Education and Research, or PGIMER, Chandigarh, studied urothelial bladder cancer in a 19-year-old boy. Urothelial bladder cancer affects the inner lining of the bladder and is the most common form of bladder cancer. Responsible for around 2 lakh deaths per year around the world, conventional methods such as surgical removal of cancerous tissue in the bladder and chemotherapy are used as treatments, but they just do not prevent the recurrence of UBC. But what's interesting is that this type of cancer mostly affects older people and is very rare among young adults. However, in this study, the researchers sought to find out why this unfortunate 19-year-old, who had no family history of the disease, succumbed to it. The study found that mutations in specific genes called driver and the transport of ions in the cells were key to this disease affecting young adults. Driver genes are genes that drive a cell to undergo unregulated cell divisions. The researchers identified mutations in 18 genes which take part in activities of ion channels. Since these channels regulate the growth and multiplication of cells, obstructing ion channels that transport calcium and sodium potassium could hold the key to finding drugs against urothelial bladder cancer, for which no drug exists as yet. It was Halloween last week, and along with ghosts and witches, one thing that we think about all the time is bats. In India, some consider bats as bad omens, and others, like the Naga tribes living in the Mimi village of Nagaland, hunt thousands of bats each year in the annual Bat Harvesting Festival. Did you know that bats carry many viruses, some of which could spread to humans? Well, the Nipah outbreak in Kerala was one of such. A new study published in the journal Science says that bats in northeast India carry viruses that could spread to humans. Filoviruses, such as Ebola virus and Marburg virus, are a group of viruses known to cause hemorrhagic diseases in humans and primates. Some species of bats which are killed by the Naga tribes are known to carry these filoviruses. So, when people come in close contact with bats, does that pose a risk of virus transmission? That's what the study sought to find out. Researchers from the Duke National University of Singapore Medical School, Singapore, and the National Center for Biological Sciences, NCBS Bengaluru, along with collaborators from USA and China, analyzed blood samples of bats and participants of the Bat Harvesting Festival to look for clues of the presence of filoviruses. Although they did not find any viruses in the blood, the researchers found antibodies, which act against these viruses in some of the blood samples. What does this mean? It means that these bats and humans have been sometime in the past exposed to these viruses. The researchers say that people in whose blood the antibodies were found could have contracted them from the bats. Of course, there's no need to panic, as there have been no previous filovirus outbreaks in northeast India. However, an awareness of this possible risk is necessary, says the study, as it indicates a possible transmission from bats to humans. This awareness could also equip the healthcare system to handle an imminent outbreak resulting from filoviruses. Now, let's move on from the world of bats to the world of wasps. Have you ever been bitten by a wasp, either when you were in the garden or cleaning the house? Although their bites can be painful, wasps are interesting insects in their own right. One such wasp is the paper wasp that builds its nest from paper, digested cellulose and saliva. Paper wasps have a defined social organization in their nests. There's a queen who lays eggs and many worker wasps who forage, gather nectar, and feed the larvae. With over hundreds of wasps living together in a small nest, wouldn't you expect that they would just be cramped and distributed randomly throughout the nest? But that's not the case. A study by researchers from the Indian Institute of Science, Bengaluru, shows that Indian paper wasps have a definite place in their nests. So how did the researchers figure this out? They collected 6 nests of paper wasps and set up video cameras to watch their behavior. They color-coded each wasp with a unique color and tracked their locations in the nest. If a wasp spent more than 50% of its time in a certain area, they called it as a core area, and their observations showed that these wasps preferred certain areas within their nests, where they chose to spend a majority of their time, rather than just randomly choosing a place. But why are they so specific about their place in the nest? The researchers noticed that identified core areas were distributed based on where the larvae were found. Since larvae themselves were distributed randomly, they deduced that the feeder wasps, which are the wasps with the primary job of feeding the larvae, had core areas larger than other regions in the nest, so that they could access all the randomly distributed larvae and feed them efficiently. In their observations, they noticed something really weird. The queen wasp would actively avoid any forager wasp who approached her. Forager wasps, who are the only wasps that leave the nest to gather nectar, are highly susceptible to external infections, and the queen wasp, being the only wasp in the colony to lay eggs, is evolutionarily the most valuable. She thus interacts with as few wasps as possible in order to minimize her chances of being infected. It sounds so obvious, but seriously, how clever are these insects really, right? Thank you for listening to this episode of Research Matters Podcast. We will be back next week with more such exciting tales from science and give you your weekly dose of science news. For more such podcasts and news, please log on to www.researchmatters.in.